In this recording, I'm going to be talking about one of the most commonly used logical functions, the if function. I'm going to be using the GP-Calc or GPA calculator that I created in the first bunch of recordings. If you didn't follow along on those recordings, you should be okay on this one, I believe. So I'm going to open that up, and I'm going to go to the grade records. And in column G here, I'm going to add a new value, and this is also going to demonstrate some of the power of tables. So I'm going to add a new column. I'm just going to put some comments in here, and this is mostly for demonstration purposes. And notice when I do that, I get a new column, and it is automatically, because I inserted that right next to the table, that column is automatically added to the table. What I want to do is put some comments in here that evaluate what we think about this person's grade. So I think the first thing I want to do is say if they got an A, I want to tell them they did awesome. But if they didn't get an A, I want to leave that blank. And that's what the if statement allows you to do. It allows you to put one of two different values inside of a cell based on some condition. If the grade is A, then say awesome, otherwise leave it blank. To create an if statement, I'm going to use the functions for the first time, and then after that I'll start typing them manually like I've done in the other formulas. My if function shows up in my recently used functions, but I can also go up here and search for if and say go, and here's my if function. Click on OK. The if function requires three pieces of information. First of all, what's your question? Right, what is the condition that you're evaluating? What do you want placed in the cell if the condition is true, and what do you want placed in the cell if the condition is false? So I'm going to start with the condition. I want to know if the grade is equal to A. Whenever you're comparing to text, you must put quotes around that text, otherwise it doesn't work, and it's looking for an address and you get some kind of an error. Excel is able to evaluate this, and it tells me that at least for this row that value is true. If the value is true, then I want to put the word awesome in this cell. And if the value is false, I just want to leave it blank. To leave it, you can't just leave this box blank because the if formula, here it is in the formula bar, being built as we go, has to have three pieces. Unlike the lookup where the third one was optional, the if function has to have three pieces. What's the condition? What do you do if it's true? And what if you do if it's false? So what I'm going to do is put quotation marks, this empty set of quotation marks in here. Notice that's different than a space. I don't want a space in there because then if I do searches later on, the space will show up as a space versus a cell that's empty. Two quotes right next to each other, it gives you an empty string as it's called, and it leaves the cell empty as well. So let's analyze that formula here real quick. Starts with an if and then parentheses like all functions. The condition, a comma. What do you do if it's true, a comma, and what do you do if it's false? Because we're in a table, that formula automatically copied all the way down, and every time we get an A, we get an awesome. So that's the basics of an if function. It's relatively simple. The complicated part is often this condition and creating it. These true and false values can be formulas, they can be cell references, they can be just about anything you want them to be. Often they're just plain text like we have in this example. Another one of the logical functions that you can use is the OR function. The if function only allows you to evaluate one condition to see if it's true or false. But what if you have two conditions? If you get an A or an A minus, notice the A minus down here doesn't match, that's not an awesome. What if you get an A or an A minus? I want to say awesome. The function that we want to use is the OR function, and let me demonstrate it real quick, and then the OR function is almost always embedded inside of an if statement. It is used to create what are called compound conditions, more than one condition that we want evaluated. The OR function looks like this. You start with an OR, parentheses, you end with a parenthesis, and inside here you put a list of conditions. If the grade equals A, and I'm just typing some samples in here, comma, grade equals A minus, comma, and you can list as many of these conditions as you want. So I'll just put another one in here. I don't have any A pluses, but I'll add it just for demonstration purposes. can put as many conditions as you want in here. If any one of them is true, that's how OR works. If any one of them is true, the result is true. So if I get an A or an A minus or an A plus, I get an awesome. We'll finish this with an if statement in just a second. If the only time it's false is when all of them are false. Don't know what caused that, but we'll bring it back. That was weird. Okay, so there's my OR condition. I don't really want this A plus. And so now I'm going to copy this and cut it to the clipboard and start an if statement, and redo the if statement for my comments over here. I'm going to say if the grade, what's my condition? Well, this is where I have that compound condition, and this is where I'm going to paste my OR. If the grade is an A or the grade is an A minus, that's the condition. It's a more complicated condition. It's a compound condition. If that's true, then give me awesome, otherwise give me nothing. Same thing we had before, but our condition is more complicated. If either one of these is true, then we get an awesome. Let's test that. Uh-oh. Oops. Let's get these grades out of here and put the right values in there. And notice that now that I'm in the middle of this, it's just giving me the cell reference, but that should be okay. And I think I'm in the wrong cell. That's the problem. Escape. Remember, when you edit these formulas, if they're wrong, edit the very first one. Otherwise, you could have issues. Now watch. If I double-click this and click on grade, it gives me the column name instead of the cell reference. So that's a good thing. So if you see cell references there, probably a clue you're not in the first row. Need to do the same thing here. Press enter, and there it works. And now where's my A minuses down here? Those are awesome as well. Okay, so that's a compound condition. Remember, that's OR, and you can use it. You put as many conditions inside those parentheses as you want. Each one greater, or each one separated by comments. All right, let's do a different example that demonstrates another logical function, the AND function. The AND function is similar to OR. It allows you to specify multiple conditions, but all of them have to be true in order for the result to be true. Another way to put it, if any one of them is false, the end result is false. Let's say we're going to get a little more picky with our praise here. In order to get an awesome, you have to have an A and at least 3 credits. So that's a different condition. You have to meet both of those criteria to get the awesome reward here. So once again, I'm going to wipe this out and start over. If, but once again, there's 2 conditions. Whenever there's more than one condition that you want to evaluate, you use either or and, depending on the circumstances. If you want one condition to be true to get an end result of true, then you use or. If you want all the conditions to be true, then you use and. So in this case, I'm going to use and. You don't have to type it all caps, but you can. It's been selected down here in my helper. I'm going to press tab, it adds the parenthesis for it. The first condition I want is I want the grade to be equal to an A. And again, I'm in the wrong cell because notice my C2. So I must have pressed enter there when I didn't mean to. I'm going to go back up here, wipe this out. If and grade equals A. There we go. Comma. The second condition you must meet is the credits must be greater than or equal to 3. Parentheses. That's the parentheses. Notice how Excel matches these up. For an instant there, these were bold-faced. And it shows you the twins. If you park to the left of it, it shows you the twins. They're both in red. That's the parentheses for the and. This is the list of the conditions that must be true. If that's true, I wonder if those giggles are hitting my recording. If that's true, then I get awesome. Otherwise, I get the empty string. Granddaughter must have just arrived. Press enter. And now I get it awesome here, but I don't get, even though this is an A, I don't get an awesome because it doesn't meet the second criteria of credits equals 1. Another way we can create if statements with multiple conditions is actually use multiple if statements. For instance, we can nest if statements. Let's say that I want to expand my comments here, and anybody who gets an A gets an awesome, anybody gets a B gets a good, and anybody gets a C gets an okay, and anybody else gets a try again, or do better next time, or something like that. With ands, that won't work because the answer is different for each condition. If it's an A, we get awesome. If it's B, it's good. So we can't do an and. Or isn't going to work for the same reasons. The answers are different. In this case, an if statement works really, really well if you have two answers to a question. The question can be complex if the number of credits is greater than 3 and the grade is an A and if you want to. But there's only two answers to the question, either awesome or you're not. If there's more answers to the question, then you need to use either nested ifs, which is what I'm going to show you here, or another way to do it is to create a lookup table. If their answers get to be more than 3 or 4, then you probably want to use a lookup table because it's a little easier to write the code. So let me show you nested ifs then. I'm going to say if the grade is an A, then we display awesome. But what if it's not? Well, I can't decide what to display. It could be good, it could be okay, it could be try harder next time. So I haven't made up my mind yet, so I need to ask another question. If the grade is a B, then display okay. What if the grade's not a B? I don't know yet, so I have to ask another question. If the grade equals C, then, oops, this one's okay. And I want to change this one to good. And finally, what if it's not awesome, it's not good, it's not okay? Then I know that the final answer that I want is try harder next time. Let's just make it try harder so it fits in the cell. Now, notice the number of parentheses. That one is for my if for C. That one's the if for B. You can kind of see them darkening as I touch them. That one's the if on the outside, so I need 3 sets of parentheses to close every one of my ifs. These are called nested ifs. And in this case, every one of my false clauses, except the very last one, is an embedded if, a nested if. It doesn't have to work that way. If it's true, you could ask another question. If it's false, you can ask another question. If it's true, you can ask another question and ask another question, and so on. I'm just going to kind of figure out the logic. See how that works. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Uh-oh. The B plus is try harder. Well, that's because I said if it's an A, or if it's a B, or if it's a C. But what about the minuses and the pluses and stuff? I want the A minuses to also be awesome. I want all the B's, pluses, or minuses to be good. There's no easy way to do this, but I did do a little research, and in one of the appendices in your book, it talks about text functions. Text functions, and we're not covering this in the class, I'm just going to incorporate it here very, very quickly. Text functions allow you to manipulate text. What I'm going to say to solve my problem here is I'm going to use the left function around my grade. If the leftmost one character is an A, then they're awesome. If the leftmost grade one character is a B, then they're good. And finally, if the leftmost one character is a C, then they're okay, otherwise they try harder. Now I made a slight mistake here. I put this formula in the second cell, but it should update them all. And there's no cell references here, so that one worked out okay. Awesome, 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 awesome. B plus is good, that's good. Here's my C, that's C plus. C plus is okay, okay. A minus is awesome. B plus is good, there's a B minus. There's a D to try harder. Looks like that's solving my problem. Now if you look at this, that's a pretty complicated formula, but remember I kind of built it one step at a time. If the grade equals A, then say awesome. Otherwise, if the grade equals B, and so on. Built it in pieces, and then I went back and added the left part to it. It's a pretty complicated formula that works quite well. One final use of if statements that really isn't to make decisions in a way, but it's to make your spreadsheets a little more professional, is to add an if statement around your formulas so that the answers don't show up until all of the inputs are available. I'm going to go down here to the bottom. I'm going to add a new row, and let's just use the same student number here. So I'm going to do a control quote. This works in Excel and Access, and I think it even works in Word tables. If you press control quote, it copies the data from up above. And let's just add a 101, 101, and let's say that, and you can see already my problem. Right? My problem here is I have an NA here, an NA here, and a try harder here, and I haven't even entered the grade, and I haven't entered the credits. Maybe I want to log the fact that the student took this course, and they haven't finished it yet. Well, I don't want all this stuff cluttering things up. The solution to this problem is to use an if statement so that if this cell, the grade is blank, then the points that I get for that grade, right, don't make a whole lot of sense. So what I'm going to do is what I call, and it's in my notes and to give some examples, I'm going to wrap an if statement around this. I'm going to go to the beginning of my VLOOKUP and I'm going to put in an if statement. And I'm going to say if my grade is empty, then in this cell display empty, otherwise display the original lookup results. So what I've added to the beginning is if my cell is empty, display the empty string, otherwise do a VLOOKUP. And the only thing I have to do to finish this off is put a parenthesis at the end for that if statement. Now again, I didn't do it in the very first cell, I probably should have, but I think it's going to update them all. And there's my if, and again, because I'm in a table, it's a little risky putting your formulas in that first one, but that one seemed to work okay. And notice now this cell is empty. But as soon as I enter a grade, then it displays the value. If I take that back out again, delete, it displays an empty cell. And I want to do the same thing for these other two formulas. I want to wrap an if statement around them. And in this case, I can actually copy and paste. Because, well, not exactly. In order to calculate the points earned, I need two things. I need to know the credits, and I need to know the grade value. So in this case, I'm going to put in an if statement that checks two things. If either one of them is blank, it displays blank. Otherwise, it calculates the formula. So here's my initial formula. In front of that, I'm going to wrap an if statement around it. If, and now if either one or the other, I need an or statement embedded inside here. If this cell is equal to the empty string, or this cell is equal to the empty string, then give me, whoops, need a parenthesis for the or, then give me the empty string, comma. So there's three parts to my if statement. Here's the condition, complicated one. What do you do if it's true? Display the empty string. What do you do if it's false? Calculate this. End parenthesis for the if statement. And now that one's blank. So now I'm going to put in my grade. And when I put in the grade, I get my grade points. Okay? But I don't have my credits yet, so this can't be calculated, so it's still blank. But as soon as I enter the credits, let's say it was a 2-credit class, then the grade point shows up. I think this adds a real professional touch to your worksheets. What it does is allows you to enter formulas that don't display anything until the data that's necessary for them is entered, and then magically the formula results appear. Very professional. Well, I'll finally do the same thing out here. This one's only dependent on the lettered grade, so temporarily I'm going to delete my lettered grade again. And in this one, notice that's a big long formula, but I do exactly the same thing. I wrap an if statement around it, and here I could copy. I could take this formula and say if the grade is blank, give me blank. I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. Press escape to get out of there and go to this one. And in front of this if statement, I'm going to paste that. If the grade is blank, give me blank. Otherwise, process this big, huge, ugly if statement, and don't forget the extra parenthesis at the end. If you forget, you'll get an error, and your first thought might be, I wonder if I remember to put that parenthesis out there that I have to do every time I wrap an if statement around these things. I still have a problem, so something else is wrong. If the grade equals the empty string, give me the empty string. Otherwise, if. looks okay. If the grade, well, maybe the copy and paste. Oh, I have an extra equal sign there. I copied the equal sign as well. There we go. Press enter, and now this is blank because there's no grade. But as soon as I enter a grade, then everything gets calculated. It looks like magic. Formulas are behind the scene, but I think it adds a very professional touch. I put that into most of my formulas, particularly formulas that I'm going to copy. In this case, in a table. Right? If I add another row, this time let's add it for number 39. 0, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 9. And let's say he took the same class, so control quotes. He got an A. As soon as I leave or press enter, then this shows up and this shows up. And notice how nothing was there until I entered, and then we take the 2-credit class and the points get calculated, and I can enter another record. So having those if statements in there makes your worksheet a little more professional. It hides these error messages and keeps the user from having to see these things. And a lot of users get freaked out when they see errors and they wonder what they did wrong. They haven't done anything wrong yet. They just haven't finished the formula. It's pretty complicated, but I think it's fairly easy. You simply wrap an if at the beginning of your formula and an extra parenthesis at the end. I always do the calculations, big, huge, complicated thing, make sure that works first, then wrap an if statement around it. Hope that helps you make your worksheets a little more professional.